Hey guys, it's Bridget with San Diego Seed Company, and I'm in the garden. It is beautiful this morning. It is springtime. We're in March, and I was just discussing with Jeff, my videographer, about what I've learned regarding weed management in the garden. And it's been one heck of a journey, I have to tell you, from gardening in ground using weed cloth to gardening 4 acres on a farm. It runs the gamut in different styles and methods of growing, but there's one consistent theme that I've learned about weed management that I want to share with you guys. So before I get into that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're notified anytime we put out a gardening video, and so that I can help you be the best gardener yet. Okay, so take a look around in my garden and you can see that, it's springtime. There's some key clues here. We've got peppers that are starting to sprout, and then I've got one lonely cabbage head that's about ready. I need to harvest that. I need to make some cabbage soup. The other thing that you can see throughout this garden is I have a lot of weeds and sprouts and things that are popping up. We've gotten several weeks of consistent rain, which means everything is germinating. All the seeds that have been hidden in the soil are popping up. Everything from stuff that we grew in previous years, like our Ethiopian kale or scabiosas, we've done seed production on them, so they're popping up, to wild chrysanthemums, which these are actually delicious and edible. They're also known as freeway flowers. Eat it. Eat it. Really good, especially when they're young and tender. They get out of control in the garden, and if I leave them in here, they're going to send their seeds, and it's going to be just crazy for me to manage. Over the years, I've gone through a lot of different methods in trying to manage my organic garden and the weeds in it. I've actually tried weed cloth several times. I don't know why, because every time I do it, I'm disappointed. It doesn't actually do what I need it to do. Every single time I try a new method for weed management in the garden, it always comes back to the same answer, and that is frequent and light cultivation. I don't know why I don't just listen to what people tell me, because many old farmers have told me the same thing. The only way that you can manage weeds is by frequently cultivating the top 1 to 2 inches of the soil, so that you disturb it, and any little seeds that are sprouting and are at what we call the thread stage, they get destroyed, and you continue to do that until you really have soil that isn't full of so many weed seeds. So what do I mean by cultivation? Cultivation is just moving the top layer 1 to 2 inches of the soil in any way possible. Depending on the different tools, you can use something like a hula hoe, where you're literally just coming in and disturbing the top 1 to 2 inches of soil. And when I'm doing that, these plants that are just barely growing and germinating, they get broken and destroyed, and they just dissolve back into the ground. And that's a very simple way to manage your weeds. If you have a raised bed, it could be something like this, or a small hand hoe, where you're going in and you are destroying any of these small weeds. Now, the bigger the weed, the harder it is to manage. So the longer the time in between your cultivations, the more work you have to do. The best and the most beautiful farms and gardens that I've seen are ones where somebody is going out every single day, maybe multiple times a day, depending on the size and the level of their farm, and they're lightly cultivating. There is an amazing farm called Never Sink Farm, and they have a beautiful setup. And one of the ways they have a really gorgeous farm is by light, regular cultivation. In fact, I've watched many videos from him, and he's actually said that once a plant gets to this size, you've lost the battle. You really want to cultivate things when stuff is just barely sprouting, when it's this big, when it's at the thread level, where this is just a tiny little thread. And he is right. The more we're out here and we're cultivating and we're moving the soil, we are going to ensure that the seeds that sprout in there sprout, then they get destroyed, they just compost back into the soil, and you continue doing this over and over and over and over again. Now, I do want to clarify something that might be confusing for brand new gardeners who just hear a lot of buzzwords out there. This is not the same thing as tilling. Now, it is soil, we are disturbing the soil, absolutely, but there is several benefits to this. I'm aerating the soil, so I am breaking up any soil crust. So especially if I'm going to direct sow, I have light, fluffy soil, which this is a lot better to direct sow into something like this versus soil that is clumpy and crusty. And the other thing that I'm doing is I'm staying on top of the weed management, which is going to make my garden more enjoyable. I cannot tell you how many times I've let the weeds get out of control, and then I go out into the garden and I just want to turn back around because I just feel overwhelmed and I don't know where to start, and I can't plant my crops if everything's all weedy. And we have several of the worst weeds possible here. We have nutsedge, we have Bermuda, we have purslane. Those are all very hard crops or weeds to manage, but I've been able to manage them relatively easily with regular cultivation. Now, something you might also be thinking is, okay, well, maybe you don't have this much space in your garden that's not planted. Like if we come over here, this area over here is really dense. I've got so many plants over here. I have my beautiful red flowered favas. And in between these plants, yes, I have some weeds, but the plant canopy is actually making it so that it's harder for weeds to grow in there. So the more plants you have growing and the more shade, the harder it is for the weeds to take over. So if you let your garden sit fallow for a season or for a couple months as you're waiting to go into a different season, that's when you're gonna see a lot of weeds. Now, the other thing that we've learned that really helps with weed management is silage tarps. Basically laying down a piece of plastic that allows the soil underneath to remain moist, the seeds to germinate, they don't see any light, and then they die. Let's go peek real quick at what that looks like in the back garden. Okay, so silage tarps are tarps that are laid on the ground to hold in moisture, allow for weed seeds to germinate, and then die off because they're not having access to light. Look, you can see the compost that we put in here. For some of you, this may not be super practical because you do need to leave this on for a good period of time. Several months, really. In fact, a whole season is an ideal time to have this on here. Now, as I mentioned, we have one of the worst weeds in the world. It's Bermuda. Not even a silage tarp is going to kill off the Bermuda, but it makes it a lot easier to come in and pull it out. You can see it's popping out super easily because the plant is not getting access to sunlight and it's slowly starting to wither and die. It's really hard to completely get rid of Bermuda. In fact, I've just learned that I'm just gonna have to manage it in the garden, and that's gonna have to be good enough for me. But basically, by covering this up, I'm not getting tons of stuff that is growing, and then I have to come in with a shovel and use my back and do a lot of hard physical work to get rid of the weeds. In fact, you can see right on the perimeter of this garden bed all the stuff that has popped up. That stuff would absolutely be popping up inside of this bed right now if I didn't have it covered. So we covered this in the fall, knowing that we weren't going to do a winter garden back here, and we're just going to leave it. And in fact, this area over here was covered as well, and you can see we just planted our dahlias, very excited about that. It's relatively weed-free. Of course, a few things are going to pop up here and there, but when I came in here to plant my dahlias, my job was so much easier because I wasn't having to weed whack through a bunch of crazy growth that had happened all winter long. If you take a look on the perimeter, you can see all that wild chrysanthemum that would have been growing in here along with nasturtiums and anything else that the seed had fallen in here, and then I would have a lot more work to get this bed prepped and ready. So in the garden and on the farm, one of our new policies is that if we're not growing in that space, we keep it covered to keep the weed growth at a minimum so that when we go back into that bed or that row on the farm, we have less work in the long run. Okay, so to recap here, if you're starting a brand new garden and you are not going to plant in that area for a little while, use a silage tarp to cover the soil so that you don't have massive amounts of growth while you're waiting to plant in that area. The other thing that you can do is consistently and regularly cultivate the first 1 to 2 inches of your soil so that any tiny little weed seeds that do germinate, you knock them down when they're little and it's less work in the long run. You're also doing other benefits to your soil. You're aerating it, you're making sure that the top 1 to 2 inches is light and fluffy, which is the best for direct seeding. So there's double benefit there. And my last tip is something I talk about a lot in my videos. Let's go back to our original part of our garden and I'll show you something I've been doing for many many years that can help with weed management. So a lot of you may have noticed this is not covered in mulch like a lot of other areas of my garden. Well, that's because as I've gone through and cultivated, the mulch has gotten mixed into the top layer of the soil. If you want to put heavy layers of mulch in your garden, which I always recommend, mulch is amazing. I talk about mulch in all my videos, mulch, 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 it's incredible. If you do want to do that, it does pose a little bit of an extra challenge because weeds will still grow through them, not as much. Mulch does help to manage weeds a little bit, but here's a prime example. If we come over here, here's some weeds that have popped up in my mulch. Luckily, you can still go through and get these weeds out, and a lot of times they'll be loosely rooted in all of that mulch. So whether or not you are planting in soil like this that is very little mulch on top or a heavy mulch bed, the idea is not to wait until your plants get this big to come out and do your cultivation. Come in and look at that. Look how easy it is. And I know I have a lot of work to do. I got a 7-month-old. Don't judge me. But it's so easy to break these up when they're little versus when I come to a big old weed like this. I gotta really get in there to get it out. So if I would just stay on top of this, I mean, if there was more hours in the day and, you know, I was Superwoman, I could keep this whole area a lot neater and a lot tidier. The whole premise of this video is just to tell you that I've gone through a lot of different ways to organically and regeneratively manage weeds in the garden and on the farm, and it always comes back to the same thing. Get out there in the garden. Use your hoe, your hula hoe, your wheeled hoe, your hand hoe, whatever you have, and cultivate frequently and oftenly to get a handle and to get ahead on weeds before they get ahead on you.